Simon once asked that a selection from his work be read at his funeral, and after much contemplation, I decided to read some lines from his best-selling novel, Journeys into Black. The piece, though profane, I feel captures the essence of his existence on this earth. Slowly, button by button, he began to expose her. Her firm, hard breasts pushed tightly against her bra, and he could see the outline of large, dark nipples underneath the sheer material. He kissed the exposed skin and licked his tongue down over her tanned and muscular stomach. The bulge in his pants was now begging to be released. She smiled at his discomfort, and though there was a grin on her face, there was a slap in her words. "Hurry up, baby. I've been fucked by worse pigs than you." Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth to you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you are taken, you are dust, and to dust you shall return.
Can I ask you something?
No comment.
I just wanted to ask you a question about Simon Black. How long have you known him, ma'am? I was wondering if I could ask you some questions about this funeral. How do you feel about it?
Comment on how loved ones choose to deal with their grief. Excuse me, I'm late for another funeral.
How do you feel about Simon Black's death?
The state is being decided in the court. Who gets what? I can't talk to you.
Okay, but please, I just want to know, why did you pour his ashes down the sewer?
He said that if he should die because he came from the sewer, that's where he wanted to return to.
Okay, you were the last person to see him alive.
There's no comment. Yeah, really appreciate this extra tutoring, but I was thinking it might be easier if I did it at the university.
No. Let me take your jacket. Giselle, there's something I'd like you to read on the computer. It's just something I've been working on, and I'd like to get your opinion.
What is this? I mean, why did you show me this?
I just wanted to get your opinion.
It's disgusting.
Don't you like pornography?
No, I find it degrading.
Why?
Please.
I just want to know exactly why you find it degrading. Why don't you take off your clothes so that we can discuss it? I just want to see your beautiful young body.
On second thought, why don't you take off your clothes, you bastard?
Okay, let's stop there. Read back the last bit.
The waiting was the best part. The waiting was the foreplay. He realized he was sweating. Reaching his hand down to his crotch, he could feel the enormous swelling of his anticipation.
He could feel the enormous swelling of his anticipation. When the knock on the door came, he got up and walked towards his sexual destiny.
You asked us not to show your face. Why is that?
There have been letters, threats.
Because of your writing?
Yes.
how do you explain the fact that all your work, your pornography, is incredibly violent? Why is that?
We're all prisoners of our fears.
Well, you write about sex. You're afraid of sex.
Yes. Sex is the battleground of men and women.
Well, I don't think most people would describe their sex life like that.
Then they've never been in a long-term relationship.
What do you say to your detractors who claim your writing perpetuates violence against women?
I'd say they've only read my first novel.
So to start off, I'd like to know how long you've been working for.
I've been working for him for about 2 years. I'm sort of an actress secretary.
And are you also his lover?
It's a job.
What's your background?
Some theater, video.
Porno films?
No.
How did you start working for him?
We met at a party, slept together, you know. One thing led to another.
Each of his novels that you've been working on gets progressively more violent. His last ones are venturing into incest, sadomasochism, torture. You act all these things out with him?
Some of the torture and stuff, you know, of course he uses other things. He'll visit a slaughterhouse sometimes, but the sex stuff, yeah.
Does it ever bother you, some of the things he writes?
No.
So you sound very matter-of-fact, I might even say jaded. Some people find the kind of pornography you do very upsetting.
Why do you keep calling it pornography? I mean, I find books about people killing other people much more upsetting, and they call that serious work. Throw in some sex and it automatically becomes pornography.
So you feel you're doing serious work?
Yeah, I do. He's writing about the truth, the real world, and if people find that upsetting, then they ought to start fixing the real world and not the writers who write about it.
When I was 8, we lived with my stepfather up around Skagamoosh. He was a trapper and used to let me check his lines with him. He'd been having a fight with another trapper who claimed my stepfather was poaching. The other trapper had set a razor snare in our path, the kind that can cut a small animal's head right off. We were walking along. My father was in front, when suddenly, I remember this branch whipping up and he starts screaming. Well, it cut into my dad's leg, right to the bone. I was a kid. I had no idea what to do. He bled to death. Some people think it's weird, but I practice operating on meat. You know, chicken, lamb, pork. I apply anesthetic, cut them open, then stitch them up again. I never want to be caught unprepared again like I was with my stepfather.
Simon told us the story about his stepfather's death. It obviously had a very traumatic effect on him.
His death?
Where he bled to death from the razor snare out in the woods.
Simon's stepfather is not dead. He works as a janitor on Parliament Hill.
Really?
Simon is a born liar. Perhaps that's why he likes to write stories.
Maybe we could talk a bit about his childhood. What was he like as a boy growing up?
Quiet, not very bright.
Was there any sign that he might one day become a pornographer?
I caught him smelling his sister's underwear once.
Mrs. Black, do you love your son?
What's love?
Do you feel close to him?
My son writes violent, perverted smut. How close do you think a mother would feel to a son like that?
He told us he loves you.
Personally, I believe Simon is a psychopath, and he'll tell you whatever it is that you want him to say. As for this mother-son love crap, that's what it is, crap.
Simon, how would you describe your relationship with your mother?
My mum and I are very close.
Really?
A mother's love is something you can count on. That's important.
She told us in an interview that you were a psychopath and that she didn't like you very much. She also told us that your stepfather is alive and doing well. And the fact is, I just want to get to the truth about you and your work. So what exactly is the truth here?
I know my writing bothers her. A magazine article once suggested that she was to blame for my work. You know, Freud, hating women, loving my mother. I think it hurt her very deeply.
Is your stepfather alive or dead? Who's telling the truth?
What's truth?
I was teaching at the university and he was one of my students. Every day he'd come in with 4 or 5 pages of this very dark philosophical stuff. Always 4 or 5 pages, always the beginning of a new novel. Well, that's not unusual. A lot of would-be writers start out that way and they get stuck after a few chapters. So I finally sat him down and I said, look, quit trying to write the great Canadian novel. Write about something you understand. Write about something from your own experiences. The usual, words of wisdom shtick. So he went away and finally came back about a week later and presented me with a complete novel. Said he wrote it over the long weekend. Well, it was a nice piece of soft porn. Now, my company usually publishes romance novels, but there was a certain kind of energy, something was very compelling about what he had written. So I decided to publish it, and it's been a very good seller.
Well, how would you describe him as a writer?
Well, most writers take their writing with a grain of salt, but Simon is very serious about his work. He says there's a real art in writing porn. Now, there are only so many words you can use in writing porn. Prick, cock, boner, and, well, the placement of them, well, that's where the art comes in. For example, cock. There's just, a right place to use cock. I guess, really, he does have a point. The audience for erotica is very fickle. They always want to see that you're pushing the boundaries. And now, with his latest novel, Travels in Black, he does push the limits. I don't mind a little S&M, a little bestiality, but it's getting to the point where I don't think I will be able to be publishing his work any longer.
His breasts were firm. His tits rose eagerly to her touch. Soon they were rock hard as her fingers pinched him. He liked to hear her squeals of pleasure as she abused him in small ways. Man, woman, woman, man. The boundary was being lost in the equalizer of their lust. Could you groan a bit? How many gorgeous students had passed through his classes, eager to use his mind and yet refusing to use his body. This beautiful young thing would finally answer all of his dreams.
We found that the most effective means is to target a store that distributes pornography, and we wait outside for men who are purchasing it, and we videotape them. So it capitalizes on men's guilt, and they don't want it made public, and they don't want it publicized.
What if they're just buying erotica?
Well, statistics have shown that if people are given access, it escalates quite rapidly from, erotica to porn to hardcore porn.
Okay, well, some people say that pornography is in fact actually a healthy way of dealing with fantasies.
Well, that might be true for a small portion of the population, but where there's smoke, there's fire. And if it's so healthy, why are men so guilty?
Okay, you talk about men. What about, say, lesbian pornography?
Well, any pornography that denigrates, the person is bad, but the problem is violence against women in society, so that's what we focus on.
Are you familiar with the writer Simon Black?
Yes.
Okay, he says he finds your group has a very blinkered approach to pornography. He says, in his mind, commercials are actually the worst type of pornography.
Well, we're familiar with Simon Black's theories, his generalization theories, and they frankly just don't hold water. I mean, the guy makes a lot of money off his work, and his work focuses on the denigration and, frankly, very blatant violence against women. Have you ever worked in a women's shelter? Have you ever experienced women who've been the victims of incest or rape? I mean, if somebody like Simon Black had one iota of that kind of experience, I think he would have changed his professional choice pretty fast.
Okay, I was told by a friend of yours that you had a relationship with him. You slept with him. Is that true?
That's not true.
It's not true at all?
It's not true.
So you don't know him personally, or?
I've had some dealings with him. A long time ago, in the past.
I want to be honest here. We've been taping for a few days now, and I have to say I find you a little creepy. Things like your relationship with Giselle seem more than a little abusive to me, as is your writing towards women and actually people in general.
Yes, I know. I was getting the impression that you didn't like me. Aren't you supposed to try to be objective or something?
Well, I want to understand why you do what you do. I want to know how you answer all your critics out there.
I don't answer my critics. They're more interested in their own opinion than mine.
So you feel no need to justify your work?
Justify myself seems more what you want. Reality is so much more horrible than anything I could write. I don't understand why anybody should be mad at me just writing the truth. Maybe it's because I make a convenient target for other people's personal agendas.
Well, it was interesting that we couldn't find any men to interview about you. Everyone you know is a woman.
Well, the men I know are unable to accept what I do, even though they make up the majority of my readers. The women are more understanding and accepting of me and my work.
Detective Keitel? Detective Keitel, can I speak with you for a second?
Yeah, sure.
This is Simon Black, right? The body?
Yeah, the pornographer.
What exactly has happened here?
Well, it looks like it's been a pretty grisly murder, a mutilation. We found his legs over here by the walls, you can see. His torso back over the hill, and some of his internal organs scattered around the grass.
Do you have any idea who did it? Any suspects?
Well, My guess would be one of his more perverted readers.
Did you know Simon Black?
Well, a couple years back when I was on Vice, I had to pull a lot of his books off the shelf.
What do you think of him as a man?
The man? Personally, he's one sick cookie. Off the record, I don't think anyone's going to miss this guy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
He sensed the beast in him. It had grown enormous, living on erotic fantasies in the dark. As she unbuttoned his shirt, he realized this was the only way to tame it. He had to acknowledge it, pull it out into the light, let the world see its brutality. He knew he had committed horrible crimes, but it was not from too much freedom, but rather the opposite. Society had sought to repress him. It was that repression that turned his fantasies into raging monsters who ruptured into the night to wreak havoc and pain. This woman, this succubus, had her own beast to unleash. He was glad they had finally found each other. Together they could explore their dark, unnamed terror. To name the beast, to pull it into the light. This then was his raison d'être. Now, my darling, let's see what your sewing skills are like.